Showers in Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth and Hobart today. It's a fine Tuesday in the other capital cities. Well, the consequences of the Commonwealth Games being cancelled in Victoria will be far-reaching, but it'll be particularly hard for athletes themselves. They mark out their careers, how they're going to peak and when they're going to peak by big events like this. Jemima Montag's an Australian race walker who won back-to-back gold in the 10,000 metres at the Gold Coast and Birmingham Commonwealth Games. And she says today's news is upsetting and deflating.
It's so important for us to have the opportunity to have a home crowd. You know, it's expensive for friends and family to fly overseas to watch us compete. And so really it can be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for family and friends who put in so much time and effort and money into our careers. But also for me, I'm really passionate about inspiring the next generation to be active. And I think that's a huge loss. I understand the financial argument, but when we think about the physical activity and sporting gains and then the consequences for health and the financial burden there, you know, there's two sides to the financial argument.
I've got a lot of comments coming in saying, thank God they've been scrapped. This is what happens when the grown-ups are in charge. Perfect reading of the room. Brilliant decision by the Premier. All these messages rolling in this morning, Jemima. Do you think that they don't quite see it from your perspective?
Oh, I think it's more complex than that. I really feel for the regional and rural towns. I hope that the government does stick to their promise to still build the sporting infrastructure, the pools, the athletics tracks, the basketball courts. But it's not just about that. You know, the injection into those local economies when you have travel from all over the Commonwealth would have been a really, really great opportunity there. And I feel for the kids who would have just loved watching all of the athletes and feeling really proud to have a Commonwealth Games here.
2026 is still a fair way away for you in terms of your own athletic focus and your training. So that surely won't be an interruption to what you'd been pacing out and planning to do?
That's right. And I mean, hopefully there will still be a Commonwealth Games somewhere in that year. But, you know, it's not that simple for some athletes like myself who juggle training with full-time university or jobs. Having it in Victoria was actually part of our plan to reduce travel time and costs and jet lag. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Well, that's right. What will be the next meet for you then? What's the next meet coming up?
So in exactly 1 month, we've got a World Track and Field Championships in Budapest, which is exciting. And next year, of course, the Paris Olympics. So the Victorian Commonwealth Games was something I was really looking forward to. Luckily, I was able to compete on the Gold Coast in 2018 at those Commonwealth Games, and having a home crowd, it is such an advantage, and it felt so warm and fuzzy. And to have grandma there who hates travel, I think I feel really disappointed.
Jemima, if those games don't go ahead, if there isn't another city to step in and to present the 2026 Commonwealth Games, what does that mean for you?
Oh, that'll mean there'll be nothing to look forward to in 2026. I mean, the athletes struggled in 2020 when the Tokyo Olympics was cancelled and postponed. And, you know, we train twice a day, day in, day out for 4 years at a time looking forward to these games. And when they're cancelled, you know, you wonder, is it all worth it? So I guess the athletes will have to fall back on asking ourselves, well, why do we do this? It's not only for the major sporting events, but it's for everything else that drives us. But no doubt those big sporting events where we can really celebrate all of our hard work and inspire the next generation, that's a huge part of why we do what we do. So I'm sure all of the Australian athletes will be feeling quite deflated this morning.
Does that mean that you'll have no major international meet in that entire year? And if that's the case, what does that mean for your fitness and for your prowess?
Well, that's right. There'll be minor events that we'll be able to go and target around the world, and we'll have to just be creative and try and keep up fitness for a World Championships and the LA Olympics that will follow. But it'll certainly be a challenge.
A long walk ahead for Jemima Montag, Australian race walker who won gold in the 10,000 metres at the Birmingham and Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, was very much looking forward to the Victorian Games. They will not be held in Victoria any any longer. She was telling the Virginia Trioli it's certainly upsetting and deflating. It is a blow for athletes, of course, but a blow more broadly for regional Victoria, where much of the games were meant to be held. The shadow Commonwealth Games Minister, David Southwick, says the Games needed to deliver a vital legacy.
Well, Daniel Andrews promised a world-class Commonwealth Games, and instead we've got a world-class stuff-up. And again, Victoria and Victorians have been humiliated on a world-class stage. We've just been picking ourselves up off the mat after our record lockdowns. We want to restart Victoria. This was a great opportunity to provide valuable, important infrastructure into the regions, and there's just full of uncertainty. The idea today that we've seen a budget blowout from a $2.6 to $7 billion, and even the Premier himself said he's unsure even if it was going to be even more than that. How could Daniel Andrews get this so wrong? We've had 17 months to be able to plan for this Commonwealth Games, and everybody's been left in the dark. I've been talking to the regions today, and they're really concerned that the promises that Daniel Andrews is making now, that he will keep those. And, Ros, if you were going to start by providing valuable infrastructure into the regions, you wouldn't do it like we're doing it now, where it's like trying to retrofit a house once you're already 3/4 of the way through. It's a huge mess, it's a huge stuff-up, and Daniel Andrews has got egg on his face.
It is hard to argue with the Premier's reasoning, though, isn't it, that potential revenue doesn't justify the huge price tag? Hasn't he made a brave decision in pulling the pin?
Well, we should have known a lot of this from the start. If you don't plan properly, then you fail, and that's what's happened. This government hasn't planned, hasn't done the work. We only hear about this stuff now. We've got $30 billion of infrastructure blowouts in Victoria on major projects. Jacinta Allan, the Deputy Premier, who's responsible for Commonwealth Games delivery, has been the minister responsible for all of these blowouts that Victoria is currently facing, that's led to the huge debt that Victoria is experiencing right now. And this is another symptom of bad management by the Andrews government. And unfortunately, you've got people in the regions that are really suffering. And if you ask many of the regions, they'd say we need our roads fixed. We need to ensure that we have our healthcare up and running. So these are the kinds of things that should have been invested in right from the start. I mean, Daniel Andrews is saying he's going to take a portion of the money that was promised and put that into the regions. How is that going to happen? And we need to ensure the regions don't miss out. And also, there are a whole lot of unanswered questions in terms of these contracts. Daniel Andrews has effectively ripped up a contract when it comes to Commonwealth Games. Is there going to be financial compensation with that? And there's about 1,200, from what I understand, purchasing contracts that have already been embarked on. What happens to those contracts? And then also the jobs, 7,000 jobs. What is going to happen to those people that have been promised jobs? And I suppose finally and importantly, the athletes, people that have been really thinking about this in their hometown, training. A lot of these kids, families have all been let down today.
But the Games budget is going to be redirected to housing as well, with social and affordable homes planned for cross-regional Victoria. Don't you think people would prefer to have a roof over their heads than watch athletes compete?
Oh, look, no question. And we've been saying all along that the Games needed to deliver vital legacy. That was the key element. So you'll have no argument from me about that. But if you were going to, if you're not going to build the Games, you would have had a different starting point when it comes to the legacy. And the fact that Daniel Andrews went down the path and said we're going to deliver a world-class Games, he's pulled the pin now, the legacy will be very different. The homes, which is desperately needed, also need to be delivered in a way that is going to benefit the regions, all the regions, in an appropriate manner. And you kind of need to start all from scratch. There's been lack of consultation into the places like Ballarat, Bendigo, Geelong, Shepparton, Morwell, Gippsland. So Daniel Andrews needs to start again. We need to talk to what the community actually want, what they need. Everyone that I talk to in the regions at the moment talk about the massive potholes on the roads. You can't drive on them at the moment. Now, what's going to be done around things like this? It's a mess. It's a huge mess, Ros, and I just can't believe that we're in this situation.
That's David Southwick, who is the Victorian State Opposition's shadow Commonwealth Games Minister. I guess he doesn't have that job anymore. He was speaking to Ros Charles about that surprise announcement today to cancel those Commonwealth Games. Continue in coverage on that to come on ABC News Radio. Regular news headlines as well. It is 2:15 Eastern Time, 1:45 in the centre, 12:15 in the west. Commonwealth Games Australia has disputed the cost blowout quoted by the Victorian Premier as the reason that state has pulled out of hosting the 2026 event. It says the government's estimates presented in June were less than half the $6 billion price tag suggested by Premier Daniel Andrews today when announcing Victoria will no longer stage the Games. The New South Wales Premier has defended a decision to sack the state's fire and rescue chief, saying the minister wanted a new direction for the body. The ABC understands Fire and Rescue Commissioner Paul Baxter had his contract terminated yesterday due to concerns from the government over his financial management and ongoing tensions with unions. And the freshly minted National Anti-Corruption Commission has revealed it's now considering more than 400 complaints about alleged Commonwealth corruption. Among the referrals is consulting firm PwC, which has come under fire for its use of confidential Treasury information on multinational tax avoidance. Just some of the stories making news this hour. To another one now. Traditional owners on South Australia's Eyre Peninsula have won a legal challenge to stop the federal government building a nuclear waste facility near Kimber, northwest of Adelaide. Now, the government had planned to store low and intermediate level radioactive waste at this proposed facility, but traditional owners argued it would interfere with a sacred site and that they weren't properly consulted before it was approved. The decision's been welcomed by opponents, but it leaves the future of the project in doubt. Dave Sweeney, a nuclear policy analyst with the Australian Conservation Foundation, has been involved in this process from the start. He was at the court today and joins us now. Dave Sweeney, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Glenn.
You've been supporting traditional owners throughout this court action. How pleased are you with today's ruling?
Very pleased, very relieved, and what's happened today is that the Federal Court has said that this plan, which is always unwelcome and unnecessary, is also unlawful. So it's drawn a line under it. It's a very significant decision for the bundle of people, for South Australia and for all Australians, actually, Glenn.
So the dump